Across the Wide and Lonesome Prairie, the Oregon Trail Diary of Hattie Campbell, pages 35 to 43. Written by Kristiana Gregory, read by Christina Grieve. 2 days later, now that Aunt June's feeling better, she took her calendar around until she found someone who'd been making notches in the side of a wagon. We think it's May 8th. Saturday, 1847. In the distance, there's a light green ribbon stretched through the middle of a wide valley. Pa said, "This is the Platte River, and it will guide us into the mountains." The days are warming up, so Peppa and I take our shoes off to walk. This is after we're out of our mother's sight. The tops of our feet are brown from the sun. The bottoms are tough as leather. She is more talkative now, and not at all shy about lifting her skirt to cool off when no one's looking. I'm fond of her. Like me, she's worried about the lost children and their poor mother. More so maybe because she and Wade themselves are twins. We still look behind us, hoping to see dust from their family's wagon trying to catch up. Wade joined us today with one of his new friends, a tall boy with curly hair and a gentle manner. His name is Gideon. He's 17 years old, but so shy he took one look at Peppa's beautiful green eyes and blushed. He stared down at his feet almost the whole 3 hours we walked together. Wade, now he's not shy. He told a joke when he figured I was the only one listening to him. And it went like this: X, X, X. Aunt June saw over my shoulder while I was sitting after supper, and she said I must not repeat such naughty jokes, and that I best cross it out before my mama sees. But I still think it was funny. May 10th, Monday. As we headed down a bluff toward the Platte River, there was already many campfires, tents, and wagons. It felt the same as when our steamboat arrived in Independence. So many people. Most are from Wisconsin territory. They have northern accents, a speech that is not near as slow as folks from Kentucky. Some brothers from Iowa have brung with them 800 young fruit trees to plant in Oregon. The seedlings are just a few inches tall. "Well," said Pa, "seems these here are our new traveling companions." The trail is broad and sandy here on the south side of the Platte, and it feels like we're pulling uphill. Pa says we'll go over 100 miles before we have to cross, and it'll take maybe 10 days. I do dread having to cross another river. Mosquitoes are fierce. There are itchy bites on my arms, neck, and cheeks, even on my head, where my hair is parted. It is near impossible not to scratch vigorously. Every morning we fry up skeeter cakes. I've tried to stir quick, and even if the batter is clean when I pour, somehow bugs see it as a place to land. And land they do, like specks of pepper. I can see no way around it. At night there are campfires way across the river on the north side. Our men are talking low amongst themselves, wondering if Indians are following us. If they are following us, what do? Come sunup, all we can see is dust and horses and what looks like wagons. But Pa says if they ain't Indians, what are they? And why do they travel alone? Evening. Tall Joe and 3 of his friends crossed over by way of sandbars and shallows to see who these strangers are. "They're Mormons from Illinois," Tall Joe reported back to us. "Their leader is a big fella named Brigham Young. There is only 3 women and 2 children, and the rest is men. About 140 we counted. And it looks like there's some servants." Tall Joe said they're heading west, maybe to the valley of the Great Salt Lake to start a colony. Thousands more will come next year. Don't ask me why. It's just a desert full of dead things. Paul asked Tall Joe, "But why do they say on the other side of the river? There ain't no trail." "I don't know. the old trapper said between mouthfuls of beans. Maybe they's worried there won't be enough grass. I don't know. A wagon train is like a small town the way talk spreads. Soon everyone, it seems, had a story about the Mormons. Mainly that Mormon men each have several wives, and the reason they left Illinois is because they want to find a place to live where folks won't keep telling them they're committing adultery. Mrs. Lewis said, "Frankly, I prefer they stay on the other side of the river, on account I don't want any polygamists getting friendly with our daughters and sisters. Leave old Brigham Young be. Let them go their way. Myself personally, I think something's wrong with the religion that says men get to have as many wives as they please all at once." And Pepper says so too. Before bed. Forgot to say that today Bennett took off his shirt and threw it in the river. I don't know why he did this, except that he's 2 years old and he doesn't know better. Now he has one shirt to last all the way to Oregon. I must carefully watch to make sure he doesn't also throw away his shoes. Next day. At noon, Mama was looking through our kitchen box, taking things out and then putting them back. "Hattie," she said, "have you seen Grandma's china plate, the little one with the roses?" I thought I put it in here after breakfast." I helped Ma look. We tried to think together where we last set it. Suddenly I caught my breath, remembering. Pepper and I had carried our family's dishes to the stream where we dipped them in cold water and rubbed them with sand. To dry, we lay them on the grassy bank, and we sat for a while talking. There were other women doing the same, and one of them was Mrs. Kenka. I'm worried Mrs. Kenka has stolen something else from us. But if I tell Mama, there might be arguments. And Ma is already wore out and nervous as it is. I don't want to bother her with something new to worry about. How can someone who looks like my dear old grandmother be a thief? After supper, when the fiddles were getting warmed up, I walked over to the Kenkas' wagon just to see what I could see. Mr. and Mrs. was sitting on stools by their wheel, talking sweet to the Anderson family. The 5 little girls were on a blanket that was laid out in the dirt, playing with the tea set they made from acorn caps. Cassia was singing a song to her baby sister, Eliza May. "Hello, Hattie dear," Mrs. Kanker said. "We're having cocoa in a moment. Would you like to join us?" "No, ma'am, I would not." I kept walking. My, she said. I know it wasn't polite to answer her so sharp, but I do not care. Later. We are camped by the Platte. Smoke from the Mormon campfires drifts toward us with a good smell of beef roasting. I would like to meet the 2 Mormon children and see what they're like, what kind of clothes they're wearing, and so forth. How lonesome it must be for them not to have friends to play with on such a long journey. Mosquitoes are still a terrible nuisance. Every bit of my skin itches. Ma says the only way to keep them off is smear mud on our bites. But I tried this 3 nights in a row. By sunup, my face was so tight I couldn't smile. And when it was all washed off, my skin was dry as stone, which itched almost as bad as the bites. Peppa and I followed a tiny stream out of camp to a marshy area. Growing nearby was a small crop of wild carrots and parsnips. We pulled their bushy tops until we had enough to fill our aprons. I dislike vegetables. They make me feel all vomity. But Aunt June says to gather any food we see because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. Along the path, we also find a tree with tiny green apples. But we left them as they weren't ripe. Another day. Something horrible has happened, and I fear I'm to blame. Just before supper last night, Cassia came to where Peppa and I was cutting up potatoes and onions for soup. While Cassie watched, I sliced all the parsnips and gave her a couple bites when she held out her palm. The kettle was hanging over a fire near the center of camp, so Peppa and I brung the vegetables along with 3 salted ox tongues, preserved from those that died the other day, We dumped the meat and onions into the boiling water, but saved the rest to add later. We returned to help Mrs. Lewis, Pepper's mother, make pies. I rolled out dough on the wagon seat, enough for 6 pie crusts. This took near an hour. While I was pressing them into pans, we heard screams. Lying in the dirt by the kettle were 3 boys. They were shaking and twisting and foaming at the mouth and gasping for breath. When we saw that one of the boys was Wade, Pepper and her mother ran with their hands in the air, crying out his name. Such was my hurry that when I jumped down from the seat, my skirt swept the pie crusts off, down into the dirt. "What is it? What's happened?" Wade's mother cried, pulling him into her arms. Pa noticed the basket of vegetables had been knocked over. He scooped up a handful and yelled, "No one eat anything! No one!" He leapt onto a crate so folks could see him and kept hollering, "Who made this soup? What's in it?" I was so frightened my insides were shivering, but I stepped forward. Pepper did too. "Pa," I said, trying not to cry, "it was our turn to cook tonight. We made it." "Hattie, show me what you put in quick." To the gathering men he shouted, "Bury all this! Bury it now!" Meanwhile, some of the women were scooping charcoal from the fire and crushing it into powder. They tried to force it down the boys' throats with water, but their jaws was clenched too tight. Pepper and I showed Pa where we cut the meat and vegetables. He picked up the potato peelings, smelling them, put a piece on his tongue, and waited a moment. He did the same with an onion skin. He tasted a sliver of beef. "These all right," he said. "What else, Hattie?" I showed him the parsnip tops we broke off and had set aside for salad. Pa's face fell. He looked up at Mr. Lewis, then back at me. He sniffed the greens, then placed a tiny bit of the root on the tip of his tongue. In an instant, he spit it out. "God help us," he said. "This is water hemlock. It's poison. Hattie, wash your hands right quick."